We are going to discuss your recent PR launch with Lama AI. Give us a quick summary of what you actually launched. What was the news?
All right, so a few months back, we closed our seed round of $9 million, led by Hetz Ventures with Viola Ventures, and participated by Foundation Capital and 630. And basically, we didn't rush with the announcement right after the fundraising was completed for a few reasons. Number one, we wanted first, it's sort of ammunition, right, that you need to use smartly and sort of define the purpose of the PR. I can tell you what it is not. All right, it is not about your ego. It is not about showing your mom, hey mom, I'm on the news, right? It should have the way that we see it at least, probably most importantly, some business purpose. And also not less important, but I would not necessarily rush for a PR for employer branding in this current timing. But, in the past, that could also be, I think, in the past, and I'm talking about like half a year ago, that could also be a compelling reason to do so. We chose to go out for business purposes, basically to make sure that our potential partners and customers, etc., are aware of our existence and the strength of the company and the VCs that stand behind us, as well as to have our employees also out there, which builds trust, credibility, and obviously also starts to generate additional momentum in terms of inbound opportunities. In our case, it's bank partners and fintechs and software companies that want to tap into the embedded lending space. So for us, it was, that was the main reason.
And that's why I assume Money 2020 was a big part of this as far as timing goes. Like that
was
right.
So here are some, I'd say, some facts, basically. We wanted to launch to run the announcements before Money 2020, which is the largest fintech conference in Vegas every year, sort of toward the end of October. And I'd say that in order to be ready for announcements, right, you have to have the right reason, and that's great. But number two, you also need to be ready in terms of a website and branding and what's not, an ability basically to deal with the volume that you're expecting, and also to leave a very good impression. So it took us, I guess, a few weeks more than we wanted to complete all the website building, etc. So that was, one thing. And then the other thing, we were ready to launch about 2 weeks before Money 2020. So that's when I started to figure out, okay, how we're gonna roll it out. And what I learned sooner than later, that TechCrunch, which was one of the leading publishers that we wanted to announce the news, had their annual TechCrunch Disrupt just the week that we wanted to do the announcement, right? So that by itself could have been a good reason, for a delay. So eventually, and I'll get to that maybe later on when we understand sort of the process toward running the announcement and securing the publishers that are going to write about you. But eventually it got delayed. And we announced it actually after we got back from Money 2020, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing because our booth were, overloaded regardless, as we started to roll out from stealth even without a PR in place. So, right. and that leads me to another point, sort of to start and build momentum even before the full now PR is out. So what we did first on our way to Money 2020 is launching our new brand, like telling the world, this is how we look, visit our website, etc., etc., etc. Surprisingly, by the way, on the level of individual post, it got double impressions than the actual individual post about the fundraising. Accumulated, the fundraising got way more eyeballs, but the individual post got much higher. And I think that's associated with another learning about how you should post things on LinkedIn. So if I forget, please do remind me later on. So that's another learning, but just a nice anecdote.
Yeah. No, actually, this idea of some of our early companies that honestly, one of the first questions I get when onboarding a new company with Hetz is, when do I start speaking out loud in public about the company, even if we're still stealth and under the radar, we're not ready for any sort of PR or funding announcements, that's fine. But like, do I speak on LinkedIn about things? Do I stay quiet? Do I publish blogs? Do I try to do some PR? That's a question we get asked. And so what was your timeline like of, first of all, I'm curious about how long the actual PR process took you, but also like that transition into this point. I mean, you touched on it a bit in your first answer, but like, how did you know, kind of?
So I think that to the first part of your question, how much to reveal publicly before you go out of stealth is basically depending on the risk, right? What are you afraid of, right? Are you afraid of your competitors to whatever, copy your idea? Are you afraid of other startups that maybe didn't raise fund yet, or other entrepreneurs that you don't want them to be fully aware of, what you're building, in order to sort of delay competition as much as possible until you're strong enough and have enough funds, employees, and maybe beta customers? So I think it's a very individual situation. I've seen companies that announced the fundraising sort of 2 weeks after it happened, and some others that raised similar amounts to us maybe 2 months before we did, that didn't get out of stealth yet. Even their employees are not marked as their employees on LinkedIn, and basically they're still on stealth. So there's a whole variety, I'd say, of circumstances that could basically define the answer for that. I guess that my rule of thumb, it's like, sort of the common sense in the military. Just share on a need basis, and not more than that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the fear is what's driving it. So it's a question of like, what are you actually avoiding, and what can you constructively build from that place?
And let's say that you do go public, what will you gain? Because let's say that I'm not fear of anything, but I can post, from today until tomorrow on LinkedIn, what do we do? And unless it gets to the right eyeballs, sorry, the only ones that will see it are people from my network, my friends, family, maybe competitors. So I won't achieve anything out of sharing, right? So the share on a need basis, I think, makes sense. And even on a PR, by the way, right? We didn't open our entire kimono. We just shared whatever was needed in order to make the press release piece interesting enough, compelling enough, telling our story in the right angle, but it doesn't get into all the granularity and all the how do you call it? Some older entrepreneurs would call it Kunstpatent, right? All the like secret sauce of what you're doing.
Right. So let's get into the technical, so you guys did this on your own without a PR agency, which I've heard some founders do. It's like impressive when it works. So I'd love to hear like why you decided to do that, who you leveraged on your team or around you, if you took any support internally, and just what that project management was like.
Sure. So to tell you the full truth is that this time, unlike tens others of time that I did it by myself as a CMO or a VP marketing, I did want to get a PR firm involved, as I don't have the time that I used to have to do those things. However, and I met a few really good PR firms, and with a few of them, I'll keep in touch and I might utilize them down the road. But the immediate turnoff that I had was that the common thread I heard was, well, they typically cannot commit to anything, and that's fine, that's part of their job. But more explicitly, they said, with the current environment, we have a hard time to believe that we'll even secure TechCrunch or Venturebeat. Now, the way that I'm approaching PR in the tech world is first secure TechCrunch, Venturebeat, or both. and then secure all the industry-specific magazines, as they're typically easier to get to, and they're less strict about exclusivity or initial exclusivity or whatever you want to call it, and they'll just roll it out if it's an interest for their audiences. So the moment that I heard that, well, we cannot guarantee anything, and we have a hard time to believe that you know, TechCrunch or Venturebeat will write about you, I decided to hold off the conversations, as in the past I secured those publishers on my own, and sometimes I even managed to get both to write about it under the same, I'd say, embargo. So that was, you know, an immediate turnoff. Now, I won't say that they were completely wrong, as what I learned during my process, although we did secure Venturebeat and almost secure TechCrunch, and I'll touch that as well, it was doable. All right, but it wasn't that easy. I can tell you, and I won't mention names here, but one of the, I'd say, major Israeli reporters that covering the tech scene, etc., wrote me back. He replied to me and said, well, a $9 million seed round, is that it? It's a very small round. Now, how can you deal, you know, with that, I'd say, with that type of a comment, which obviously not true, right? And the fact that some startups are merging pre-seed round, seed and an A of $20 million all together and call it a seed round, that does confuse, I'd say, some of the reporters. And another trend that I've seen, especially on the Israeli side, that is more toward the employer branding piece of the puzzle, the current trend is to write about layoffs and startups that are getting closed. And it's not that they don't like startups that raise funds. They're nice, they like it, and you know, some of them will write about it, but it doesn't get them as excited as writing on an E-round of a new unicorn that was born, or on the other end, another startup that's just closed, you know, its doors.
You want the drama.
Well, it's drama, and it's also, you know, the trend. So, you know, TechCrunch, I would assume, are getting pitched with tens of thousands of new startups raising seed every week, every day, whatever. So it needs to have something, you know, more than that in order to get them enthusiasts about it. And also for the Israeli, I'd say, media, the same is true. In the past, they would write about $1 million seed round. Today, even 9 million doesn't get them excited anymore. So
yeah. Do you think that your story being around fintech and solving an actual problem that I think more people can understand, and especially in this market we're in, helped you? Like, there's a real story behind your company.
Honestly, no.
Oh, okay.
Although storytelling is important piece in the PR, on a fundraising PR, the main news is the fundraising itself. So I think that in general, they pay less attention to the actual story and what are you doing, etc. It's more about like how much you raise, who did you raise from, and what problem do you solve, basically. And what's your valuation, which we didn't share, of course. But you know, that's sort of, they want the nitty gritty, and that's all they care about. And they want exclusivity.
Yeah.
Also, and that was something, by the way, new to me in this PR, that none of the Israeli publishers explicitly said that they want exclusivity, but they all asked if I approached others. And obviously, I told all of them yes. But I think that was sort of a reason for them to decide whether to prioritize it above other news or to avoid it completely. And again, can talk strategy around it, but I think that was one something that was, at least for me, new in the Israeli publishers ecosystem.
So let's get into the actual, like, how you do this, like project management. How did you actually
project management timeline? So I'd say you need to start at least 4 weeks, you know, before the due dates. I'd say the first week. And I got a lot of help from one of the members of my team, and to map out sort of all the relevant publishers that covers our area, covers seed fundings, and basically who are the reporters that would be likely to write about us. I'd say that the easiest approach to find those answers is just by looking at similar companies that raised probably whatever, a year ago, 2 years ago, half a year ago, 3 months ago, and you're impressed with the coverage that they got. So just reverse engineer, search for their name with seed, whatever, in the news on Google, and then it will list out all the relevant publishers that actually cover them. And do it for a few, and then you get, I'd say, 90% of what you need. Typically, on the majority of the publishers, you may be able to find either the email of the reporter directly, if not a link to their Twitter account. And on their Twitter, they'll put their email. And if you go through this rabbit hole, you'll find their email because they want to be contacted, right? So it's not that hard to put your hand on their email address. And there are also some databases that we didn't use, but I forgot the name, but there's one very popular one that basically lists, you can sort of filter based on your category, etc., and get that list immediately. That's also, it could save you some time, but from my experience, not necessarily will yield in more success, because finding the list is not as important as understanding what's the particular reporter is writing about, and then make sure that you approach him with the relevant angle. So after we listed it, we broke it down to a tech publishers list, very short list, TechCrunch, Venturebeat, and a couple of others. And then in our industry, the banking and fintech magazines were sort of the much larger larger lists. And then I started with the actual outreach, and as I mentioned before, starting with TechCrunch and Venturebeat first. And the way that I'd recommend to work there is a sort of a waterfall. So don't approach like all 10 possible relevant reporters all at once, because public relationship, there is a reason why it's called relationship and not public transaction. I'm kidding, but you need to build a relationship, because if you'll screw it now, they'll remember it, and they will not be in touch with you, and very likely not to cover you ever again. So you need to be honest, you need to be thoughtful, and basically don't do it on super salesy manner. Typically, I like to break down the outreach to the reporter into two pieces. Just ask them, right? If this is sort of the high-level story, $9 million sit around fintech company, is that something that they're interested in writing about? That's it, right? I would say that some of them, if you read into their Twitter profile, etc., or some magazines will say, don't send me emails if you want. This is the email, send the PR directly. It could work. I don't know. For me, it's always about sort of creating the relationship, and again, sending it on a need basis, meaning someone explicitly said that he or she is interested in receiving it, right? So this was my approach. And then basically, we started to roll out and get, I would say, interest from relevant reporters. And that sort of also helped us to define, I'd say, the dates. All right, because it's important when you do send the actual PR piece, you need to put sort of an embargo date, if it's under an embargo, to make sure that you don't, lose the exclusivity that might be needed by any of the reporters. I'd say that, the reporters we were in touch with were very sensitive also, to our embargo needs, etc. So they understood that it's still, a moving piece, and coped with it. But until we had the final, I'd say, dates, we were requested already to share the stuff. So I shared, but I said, well, it might change a day or so. And again, they were super okay with it. But that's also important until you know the final date, because of a conference, because for whatever reason, make sure, right, that you take a spare, because moving it a day before might be easier than pushing it. And in any case, we shared it only, with one or two until we finalized the date. And then we started sharing it with all the rest. And that's also when I started reaching out to the larger group that I wasn't in touch with, including the Israeli reporters, etc. Only once we knew the finalized date, as I don't want to move the embargo also for too many people, because I think it's a good recipe for failure that someone will not see your email, no bad intention, and then the PR is out. And once it's out, some magazines will just not write about you.
Yeah, that's the nightmare I've heard from a lot of colleagues. Like, the nightmare is that something goes wrong with the embargo or the timing and you're done. Like, it's over. So
yeah,
it's an important thing.
And especially again for the larger tech publishers. So
yeah,
be very careful with it. Now, the other important piece of preparations is also writing the actual PR piece. So as you mentioned before, they all like drama, right? So when you think about drafting a story in general, it needs to include some, I'd say, dramatic pieces. But I think not less important, it should not be exaggerated, right? So again, be humble, keep the honesty, because otherwise you're going to get a list of questions from the reporters that are doing the work, or even you'd be asked to get on a phone call. And I did get this request and was happy to hop on a call, but basically be very truthful. Otherwise, I think you might win a small PR, but you're going to lose trust, and not recommended, not from personal experience, just as a thought process. Another thing I wanted to mention, so if it's the first time that you're drafting a PR yourself, a good source to see examples is the Newswire, which I'll touch in a minute. Again, my point of view about it in general, but for this point, it's a good source to find PRs that other companies wrote and other professionals wrote. So you could get as many good examples as possible as for the format and, maybe some language or style that you prefer better than another one. So I think that's a good use. And basically you get into PR Newswire or any of the others, and you search for a company name. And then if they send it to the Newswire, it will be there. Now, I chose not to send mine to the Newswire, and it's very cheap, by the way. It's like, I don't know, $500 or $800. I didn't even check this time, depending on the amount of words and whether you want to include a picture or not. The only thing that it should do to you is basically making sure that it is sent to whatever, 200, 300, 400, whatever you pay for, publishers that might put it somewhere on the website under a press release. Personally, I've never got serious coverage by press releases that were sent through the wire. I did get a lot of mentions, but again, more for an SEO perspective and maybe visibility out of it. But it will appear exactly as you sent it, including the media contact, phone number and email. And if you do that, just make sure that you put whatever number you're comfortable with, because first time I've done it, my phone number was exposed and still exposed through over the internet, which I don't care about, but the only thing I do care about, it does get you a lot of cold calls that are unnecessary. So that's the Newswire piece. So after the draft is ready, I would highly recommend, to get the help, of your VC friends that are native to review it. We also use an editor through Upwork. So I think although you reviewed it, you didn't have a lot of comments, not because I'm that good, just because I'm using an editor and a proofreader to make sure that, it's as professional as possible. And you also need to include in the PR kits sort of a few graphics, like, the pictures that you want to use, whether it's the team, the founders, logo, a screenshot. If it's a consumer app, you might want to share some more screens that are well designed also in terms of the background, etc. It's not just like a stupid screenshot or something, but some more style to it, and the company logo. So when you do send the PR kit, it includes the press release itself and a folder or a zip file with the actual pictures that could be used, as well as you need to mention the credit. So if it's a photographer named John Doe, mention that the credit should go to John Doe.
Yeah, that's great. That's all very good technical points that I think a lot of people don't realize. Technically, what was your media kit? Did you send a bunch of links to a drive? Like, what did you
I said, so in the past, I just would put everything in a zip file and send a zip file. This time, I did share links to Google Drive, and I also attached it as a Word doc to the email body itself, but I didn't bother attaching the images just because it's too heavy, and I think it's easy to use Dropbox or whatever that is.
For sure. Cool. Wow, you've been very comprehensive. This has been excellent information, I think, for anyone that's dipping their toes into this. It can be very intimidating the first time. I mean, if you don't have a marketing background, it's, yeah.
Even if you do have, first time I've done it, I was terrified that nothing will, go correctly. And everybody told me, because there are PR firms that are getting paid tens of thousands of dollars to get you to TechCrunch, right? So even the notion that you can do it yourself is frightening, because but it is possible. Again, at this time, by the way, we didn't get to TechCrunch. I mentioned, the TechCrunch disrupt is one piece of it. When I figured out that we're not gonna be ready on the time that we defined for the embargo, etc., I reached out to another reporter, and I did get responses, but in the time that we planned to launch it, they just told me, well, I need to know 2 weeks in advance, which is my previous point, which is important. 2 days was not enough, and another reporter was out of office even until the end of the month. So again, it didn't play out this time with TechCrunch, but we did get very good coverage, and we're very appreciative for that from Venturebeat. But it's a matter of preparation, and again, don't do it in rush, because most likely that you're not going to get the coverage that you want to get or can get.
I would just, maybe one more question that would be helpful to Israeli founders that are going to go both Hebrew media and English media is just, are there any big differences between approaching Israeli journalists versus like international or English media journalists?
No, but I'll tell you this, that the press release itself, and it, I guess, from firsthand, very hard to translate from English to Hebrew. So although we wrote ours English first, when I approached writing the Hebrew one, I just figured out that I need to write it again in Hebrew, which just caused maybe a shorter piece than I had in English, just because some of the terminology is too hard, too complex to translate. I'd say some industry-specific terms that are well known in English, you don't even have translation in Hebrew. And also got on the Hebrew side help from the Viola team with Mirav, that she's excellent in general, but she's also a Hebrew native, so that was helpful as well. So just like I recommended with you on the English side, if you have another VC marketing person that is Hebrew fluent, do that as well.
Yeah, that's very good advice. I wish more people would follow that.
I think another small point, sort of the day of the week that you plan the announcement. So typically, I think that Tuesday and Wednesdays are recommended. This time, again, not for necessarily good reason, we went for Thursday. Oh, and that's the last story that I wanted to tell. So like I mentioned before, first time that I've done it was, scary as hell. I didn't know the outcome. The outcome was good. We got very good and wide coverage. This time, as a CEO, I was also concerned that, something bad will happen, because I don't have the full time that I had before to do it. So we did plan it eventually for Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific time, which is 7 p.m. Israel time. I was on my flight back from Vegas, and we were in a short layover in Amsterdam. And the time arrived, and I'm opening, those publishers that confirmed. And typically when they confirm, they'll do it, and they'll do it on time because of the exclusivity and other reasons that we discussed. And I refreshed the pages, and nothing is live. I went over my second flight, with the embargo, already behind us, probably an hour, and nothing is live. We landed in Tel Aviv. First thing that I'm doing when I'm allowed to open the phone is check, the links. Nothing is live. So I got a little stressed. I reached out, to a few of those reporters, and they all said that, it will go later on the day, etc. And what I learned, a few things about that. Sometimes it's out of your control. So the same day that we wanted to announce our fundraising, OpenWeb wanted to announce their $160 million fundraising, and some other companies, fired some people, whatever. So we didn't get lucky, I say, in terms of their availability to post it in the time that we wanted. But again, eventually it went out well, and we're happy with the outcome, but it can also happen. So if it does happen to you, don't be shy to reach out again to the reporters and say, hey, when are you planning to release it? Just to make sure that it's not a bug or it wasn't forgotten or anything else.
That's great advice. And also I can only imagine that stress, I'd be freaking out. So I totally get it. That's like stress I recognize.
It's a failure, right? I've done it for years for a living. And now when I need it the most to do it right, nothing goes live. Yeah.
Oh my God. There's no anxiety like PR anxiety. That's something that I know also professionally.
And also, by the way, another quick advice, if someone, stayed with us so far, don't try to be a smartass in terms of the way that you pitch, and don't try to invent the titles for the reporters or anything like that. I had once such an experience with a TechCrunch reporter that I thought that we had a very smart headline, and obviously it wasn't, but she did mention it, on the piece itself, that, the fact she was basically laughing at us. Nothing major, but some reporters love to play with you. So just don't give them reasons to.
Yeah, I'll actually add one more thing if people are still listening, which is remember that reporters are people and they have vacations, they have stress, they have timelines, they have deadlines, they have bosses. That's also something that I think people forget. They're not some sort of immortal being up there. They're actually just like us doing their jobs. So be respectful, be easy to communicate with, etc. Definitely part of it. Yeah.
And back to my last point, respect their profession. They are professional writers, not you.
Yeah, that's very true. I've been on the other side. All right. Yeah, this is amazing. Thank you so much. And good luck with the next one, whenever that will be.
Thank you. Bye-bye.